What if the life you've been chasing was never running from you at all? What if the chaos you feel isn't the world, but your mind, tangled in fear, control, and worry? Michel de Montaigne, one of history's most quietly radical thinkers, dared to propose something astonishingly simple and profoundly difficult: let go. Stop worrying, and life begins, not in perfection, not in control, but in presence. This is not self-help. This is philosophy that bleeds with truth. Welcome to the world of Montaigne, where peace isn't found by conquering life, but by surrendering to it. Michel de Montaigne understood something centuries ago that modern psychology is only beginning to articulate: that most of our suffering is imagined. Not because life is easy, but because the human mind is a relentless producer of worry. We do not simply react to reality. We live it in our heads. We build entire catastrophes before they ever happen. And more often than not, they never do. Montaigne believed that the greatest cruelty we inflict upon ourselves is the tyranny of imagined fears. Scenarios crafted in our minds that haunt us more than reality ever could. The problem, he argued, is not life itself, but our anticipation of it. It is not death, but the thought of death. Not failure, but the fear of it. Our intellect, when left unchecked, becomes a factory of anxiety, producing worst-case scenarios under the illusion that they will protect us. But what they actually do is imprison us. To Montaigne, worry was not a sign of intelligence. It was a symptom of disconnection from the present moment. We become obsessed with securing the future, forgetting that the only thing we ever truly have is now, and so we live elsewhere, in a tomorrow shaped by shadows, in a fantasy that steals the clarity of the present. In his essays, he constantly returns to the idea that much of human misery arises from our refusal to let things be as they are. We analyze, predict, rehearse our misfortunes as though knowing the pain beforehand could spare us from it. But Montaigne saw through this illusion. To him, peace was not found in mastering the world, but in calming the storm within. The irony of worry, he noted, is that it often fails to prevent pain, but it always succeeds in preventing joy. Montaigne's wisdom rested on a single, often overlooked truth: life cannot be controlled, only participated in. While others tried to conquer nature, fate, or the future through knowledge or action, Montaigne stepped back and asked, what if the real strength lies not in resistance, but in acceptance? To him, much of human suffering stemmed from a stubborn refusal to accept the natural rhythm of things. We demand that life conforms to our expectations, that health should last forever, that people should behave reasonably, that success should follow effort. But reality does not obey such rules. It flows in cycles, contradictions, and chaos. And every time we resist its current, we drown a little more. Montaigne's approach wasn't passivity. It was clarity. He didn't advocate giving up on effort, but he understood that effort becomes torment when it tries to force certainty onto what is inherently uncertain. Acceptance, for him, was not weakness but courage. The courage to face life on its terms, rather than our own. He looked to the Stoics and admired their composure in the face of unpredictability. But Montaigne added a unique layer. He accepted his own emotional instability, his fears, his desires, even his laziness. Instead of fighting against himself, he made peace with his contradictions. And in doing so, he showed that the greatest kind of acceptance is not just of the world, but of the self. Through this lens, freedom comes not by changing everything outside of us, but by changing the way we relate to it. The world is not responsible for our peace, we are. Montaigne didn't find peace by controlling outcomes. He found it by loosening his grip, and in that loosening, he discovered a deeper harmony, a quiet alignment with life that doesn't need to be forced, only allowed. Montaigne challenged the very foundation of how we understand ourselves. While much of the world sought fixed identities, roles to play, virtues to uphold, reputations to protect, Montaigne questioned whether any of it was truly solid. He saw the self not as a finished sculpture, but as a shifting river, ever changing from moment to moment. In his view, to cling too tightly to our thoughts, emotions, or opinions was a dangerous illusion. He wrote with disarming honesty about his contradictions, his moods, his changing beliefs, not to appear chaotic, but to reveal a fundamental truth, that we are not our thoughts. We have them, we experience them, but we are not defined by them. And when we confuse what we feel or think in a moment for who we are, we invite unnecessary suffering. Worry thrives in a mind that believes it must always be consistent, always be certain. But Montaigne's essays show a man comfortable in uncertainty, willing to explore an idea today and question it tomorrow. This humility, this willingness to be fluid, was his quiet rebellion against rigid dogma and intellectual pride. He believed the mind is like a garden. Thoughts grow wild, and that's natural. The task is not to identify with every vine and root, but to observe them, tend to them, and let some go. The more we believe that our every thought is truth, the more imprisoned we become by them. But when we learn to witness them, to see them as passing clouds rather than fixed realities, we gain the space to breathe. This perspective frees us from the pressure of being someone specific all the time. It allows us to grow, to change, to let go of the anxious need to be perfect or consistent. Montaigne's legacy is not one of certainty, but of curiosity, and it's in that space of open observation that worry loses its grip. For Montaigne, death was not the end to be feared, but the mirror in which life is most clearly seen. He did not avoid the subject as many do. Instead, he leaned into it, studied it, befriended it. Death, in his philosophy, was the great equalizer, the one certainty that made all human striving, all pride, all worry, appear for what they truly are: temporary. He believed that only by contemplating death, deeply, personally, can one begin to live authentically. Not with morbid obsession, but with the clarity that comes from understanding just how fragile and finite our time really is. It wasn't death itself that robbed people of joy, Montaigne observed. It was the fear of it, the silent background dread that turns every peaceful moment into a tension-filled pause. This fear forces people to deny the natural course of life. They chase immortality through achievement, through wealth, through legacy, always believing that if they just do enough, death can be delayed, or at least forgotten. But Montaigne believed that such pursuits only deepen our anxiety. The more we run from death, the more we distort life into something frantic and artificial. In contrast, when one comes to terms with death, when one stares at it without flinching, something extraordinary happens. A lightness enters the soul, a freedom. When you stop worrying about how it all ends, you finally begin to notice how it's unfolding right now. Montaigne even suggested that preparing for death was the central task of philosophy, not in a grim or ritualistic sense, but as a way to sharpen awareness. It's in the shadow of death that trivial concerns fade and true values emerge. Suddenly, presence becomes more meaningful than productivity, connection more urgent than conquest. And it is here, in the silent companionship of mortality, that Montaigne found peace, not by ignoring death, but by letting it teach him how to live. Montaigne lived in a time of war, plague, and political upheaval. Yet his greatest discovery wasn't made on the battlefield or in the courts of power. It was found in the quiet solitude of his study. There, surrounded by books and silence, he turned inward. Unlike those who sought fulfillment through conquest or constant motion, Montaigne found something radically different: the beauty of a simple life. In withdrawing from society's noise, he didn't retreat out of fear or laziness. He was searching for something deeper than distraction. He realized that the relentless pursuit of more status, more knowledge, more control, only feeds the flames of anxiety. The more we grasp, the more we fear losing. The more we accumulate, the more we suffer under its weight. But in simplicity, Montaigne uncovered a powerful truth. Contentment comes not from abundance, but from sufficiency. He wasn't advocating a minimalist lifestyle as a moral duty. Instead, he was describing a natural return to balance, a state where the mind is no longer overstimulated and the soul can breathe. In stillness, he found clarity. In the rhythm of everyday life, walking, reading, reflecting, he discovered a kind of happiness that didn't depend on achievement. This happiness was quiet, but resilient. It wasn't euphoric or loud, it was stable, rooted in presence and acceptance. Montaigne's essays are filled with reflections on ordinary things: aging, digestion, friendship, and through them, he reminds us that we don't need to escape the ordinary to find meaning. We just need to see it differently. In his world, greatness wasn't measured by how high one could rise, but by how deeply one could live. He didn't idealize detachment or renunciation. He simply chose to live with less inner noise. And in that space, freed from the constant tension of ambition and worry, joy quietly returned. It wasn't something to be chased, but something that naturally appeared when the mind stopped trying so hard to control everything and simply allowed itself to be where it was. In the end, Montaigne's philosophy doesn't offer a solution. It offers a shift, a subtle but radical invitation to step away from the exhausting treadmill of control, perfection, and endless striving. He doesn't tell us to stop caring, but to care differently. Not from fear, but from presence. Not from anxiety, but from awareness. Life, as he saw it, is not something to be mastered, but something to be lived. Honestly, simply, moment by moment. When we stop worrying, not because we've given up, but because we've learned to trust life as it is, something remarkable begins to happen. The tension loosens. The mind softens. Joy returns. Not loud or dramatic, but steady, grounded, real. We begin to see that peace was never at the top of the mountain. It was always under our feet, waiting for us to be still enough to feel it. From Montaigne, we learn that worry is not wisdom, and simplicity is not weakness. That peace doesn't come from controlling life, but from participating in it with humility and grace. That true strength lies not in endless effort, but in gentle acceptance. And that when we stop clinging, fearing, and overthinking, life doesn't fall apart. It quietly begins to fall into place.